Hello, everyone. I'm Eric Cox. I'm a member of the Netcapital team. Let's allow one moment for folks to settle in, and then we'll dig right into the EarthGrid live Q&A webinar. Let's allow one moment. Thank you. Troy and I are familiar with the 400 miles that separate myself in Southern California from Troy in the Bay Area. Would love if, while we're waiting for folks to settle in, if anybody wants to add where you're coming in from. I love that Zoom connects us all, so you can add where you're calling in from into the chat while we're hanging out, if you'd like to. I imagine we'll have some Bostonians on the line where HQ is. Oklahoma off the bat. I love that. Maine, that's great. I love the geographic diversity here. Deer Isle, I've heard good things. Washington State, let's go. A little bit of the Pacific Northwest, beautiful. Maryland will be out there soon. Look forward to checking out the DMV. Look at that, not a single repeater so far. Love that. Alrighty, we got a bunch still coming in, but we'll get started in a second. More SoCal, Illinois. There we go. Arizona. Keep cool. We're getting warm here too. Keep cool, Arizona. All right. Oh, thanks for participating in that with me. That was cool. That was really kind of Nova Scotia, Boston. All right, sorry, that's the last of it. Thank you so much for everybody for joining. As I mentioned earlier, I'm Eric Cox. I'm a member of the Netcapital team. Super excited when I get to hang out with my friend Troy here. Troy Helming is the CEO of EarthGrid. As always, the company is actively raising on the Netcapital platform. I'm going to go ahead and add a link to that into the chat feature right now. There it is. Okay, cool. So now anybody in the Zoom can go directly into the chat. You can see the link to EarthGrid's Netcapital offering, or you can go to netcapital.com and search EarthGrid, or you can go directly to netcapital.com/companies/EarthGrid. Let's do a couple quick housekeeping items before we dig in here. Please do use the Q&A feature built into Zoom. I know there's also the chat feature that I was just playing around with to talk about where you guys are calling in from. But please do use the Q&A feature built in. That makes it so much easier to track all the questions as they come in and get to as many of them as possible. And please do ask your questions. That's what we're here for. We want to keep this as interactive as possible. We're here for you. So please do ask your questions. Please do engage with the Q&A feature. And again, I'll get to as many of those as possible here. With all that being said, I think I mentioned earlier on the line with Troy Helming, CEO of EarthGrid. Why don't you come on in, join me in welcoming EarthGrid to the stage here. Troy, can you tell us a little bit about what you're building here?
Thanks, Eric. Yeah. Hello, everybody. Good to see some of you on the call and some new folks as well. So for those who don't know about EarthGrid, we have a plasma tunneling and trenching technology. So we're using plasma, which comes from electricity and air. Those are our two inputs. We basically create lightning in a tube, and then we pass air over that lightning, and it superheats the air at up to 27,000 degrees Celsius. So instead of using drill bits and chemicals and lots of manual labor, we use electricity, which is basically cheap thanks to the proliferation of solar and wind. So we can tunnel or trench faster and cheaper than conventional technologies. And our bold and audacious vision is to build an underground supergrid across North America and eventually around the world that will have tunnels for power, fiber, and water to upgrade our infrastructure.
So infrastructure is critically important right now. We're going to dig into that and some of the changes and investments in infrastructure, but we won't get there too quickly. Some of you might see that we have Jackie on the line here. That's one of the members of the EarthGrid team. She went ahead and added a link to the email there. You can reach out to the EarthGrid team by emailing info@earthgrid.io. Thank you for sharing that, Jackie. I want to give you a shout out for being on here. Thanks for your help.
Thank you. Yeah, so feel free to email us at info@earthgrid.io. And if you have any questions, just refer there. I'll also leave our phone number, our office phone number in the chat as well.
Thank you so much, Jackie. And I know the EarthGrid team cares very much about being accessible, so do take them up on that. At the least, you'll get a good conversation with Troy. But Jackie's not the only member of the EarthGrid team that we should talk about. Troy, can you tell us about the rest of your team here? Maybe we could start off with either Jeff or Scott, some really important team members helping you bring this big, bold vision into fruition.
Yeah, you bet. We have about 20 people on the team that are effectively full-time. My co-founder, Scott Lane, he's been developing and building infrastructure for over 25 years, including cell towers, fiber networks, solar farms, wind farms, things like that. And then our CTO is Jeff Zado, spelled D-Z-A-D-O. You can look both of them up on LinkedIn if you'd like. But Jeff is a roboticist, mechatronics, software engineer. He built the largest fleet of autonomous robots in North America when he was working for Amazon before, a few years ago. And that was at a big Amazon fulfillment center. Also worked on robotics at Tesla and other places. So, and there's other amazing people on the team, but I'll just highlight those two for now.
Well, I would let you off the hook, but I think we have to touch on just for a moment. You have some fantastic board members as well. Can we mention a little bit about Joan and what Rochelle brings to the team? Sorry, I was going to let you off the hook, but we got to touch on those two at least.
Yeah, sure. So yeah, Joan is basically one of the most prolific angel investors out there. She's a member of the Band of Angels based in California. They claim to be anyway, the first angel investor network in the country. They've been around since I think the 1970s or 60s. But she co-led or sponsored an investment in EarthGrid from the band, and then the band led our first investment. It was our pre-seed investment round that we're coming up on 4 years ago now. And so they led that, and Joan worked with Craig Martin and others on putting a due diligence report together for the Band of Angels and Keiretsu and other angel investor networks. So she's great. She's also got a PhD in mathematics. She worked for Bechtel and construction and other things. Rachel Payne, she's also on the board. She is an executive at Google. Well, technically at Alphabet X. X is kind of the moonshot factory of Alphabet, and she's in charge of the climate group, so climate moonshots. Very well connected, founder of google.org. She was a VC in the past. She's great. And then I would be remiss if I don't also mention Audrey Zibelman. Audrey joined our board earlier this year. She's our newest addition, and she's also quite impressive. Audrey was the Chief Operating Officer, COO of PJM, which is the largest electric grid operator in North America. In fact, some would say the world, in terms of an individual grid. She was also the former chairperson of the New York Public Service Commission and an executive at Xcel Energy, the 5th largest utility in the country. So she has extensive regulatory and utility experience.
Thank you so much for taking a little bit longer with the team. There's more folks on there. Definitely click the link to the offering page. Check out the rest of the team, but we could spend the whole hour on the team. So we are going to keep moving along here. You assembled this strong of a team. You must be tackling something huge. Can you tell us, for those who don't understand, what tunnel boring is and what the problem is? You could tie problem into solution. You could talk about how you're addressing it, or you could just dig into what problem are you solving here with EarthGrid?
Yeah, so there's two. The industry that I was in for almost 30 years is building solar farms and wind farms. And for those who don't know, it can take up to 8 years to get a solar or wind farm approved to be connected to the grid. It used to be 1 or 2 years, and then maybe 3 years, and then it was longer. Anyway, now it's 4 to 8 years. And unfortunately, 80% or 4 out of 5 solar and wind farms never get built because of lack of transmission line capacity. Well, why is that? If I had to ask all of you a question, if I asked you, how long do you think it would take on average to build a new overhead transmission line in the United States? What would you guess? Some of you, if you want, you can put an answer in the chat. How long does it take, do you think, to get a new transmission line built? Drum roll while we're waiting. The average is 15 years. And so there's all this cheap solar and wind out there that can't get connected to the grid because of lack of transmission. But if we go underground, instead of 15 years, we can do it in months, 1 to 2 years, or sometimes in months. So it can rapidly accelerate getting clean energy onto the grid and solve the power problem for data centers, AI and streaming, Netflix, all these things. Data centers are huge consumers of power and the fastest growing source of power consumption in this country. And we can't provide the power to the data centers fast enough. And so EarthGrid, because we have been approved as a regulated telecommunications utility in 46 states, which is a pretty big deal, by the way. We spent quite a bit of time and some money doing that over the last several years. But because we're a regulated utility, that gives us access to the public rights of way. So we can put our tunnels or trenches under any public road in 46 states, representing 97% of the US population and GDP. So we can build a super grid and solve both of those problems, as well as many others, getting fiber to many communities that are underserved, and improve our water, wastewater, stormwater, and other infrastructure.
Thank you so much for sharing those details. Yes, it does seem like there's parts of technology that are moving really quickly. There are kind of regulations and other components that are moving more slowly in municipalities and government officials. And I know that was a big piece of your work early on, and you have some successes to share about in a moment here. So there were some big problems there that you identified. Can you talk a little bit more about this kind of tunnel boring technology, the plasma? What does EarthGrid provide? What is your solution?
Yep, so our solution is using plasma to bore tunnels faster. And we've been at this, by the way, since 2016. We built our very first prototype in late 2017. So roughly 7 years of testing. And we've been testing in all different types of rock and geology, dry and wet, and with propane or natural gas in there or not, and even really hard rocks like basalt and granite. But to cut to the chase, what is EarthGrid's competitive advantage? We're faster and we're less expensive. We can bore it up to 100 times faster, up to 1 kilometer per day, we've been able to measure, and lower cost or cheaper, right? We can be anywhere from 40% to 98% less expensive. So we say 100 times faster and up to 10 times cheaper.
Faster and cheaper. That sounds like a winning combination to me. So we talked about how big and expensive this is, already approved in 46 states, and I imagine continuing to chug along for global domination. What does the market size look like for tunnel boring technology in this use case, and maybe even some other use cases that you imagine in the future?
Yeah, so if you look at the whole market, not just tunneling, but also the need for new power lines, like there's estimates that it's going to be between 20 and $40 trillion to upgrade the grid to accommodate the electrification of everything, the transition to electric vehicles and electric stoves and heat pumps and industrial processes and things like that, but also data centers and 5G towers that need all this power, blah, blah, blah. So that market alone is enormous, but $2 trillion is a pretty good number for the annual TAM, or total addressable market.
So if that didn't pique your interest, I'm going to use this as an opportunity to remind you that you too, listening right now, can go to netcapital.com and invest in this deal. Of course, that's not an investment recommendation. I am a net capitalist, but you too have that opportunity. You can go directly to netcapital.com/company/EarthGrid, or you can click the link that I added into the chat feature there. We had the good pleasure of hanging out at one of your many successful pitch competitions. You took home first place, the Platinum Award. It was among 4,000 plus startups that competed at Pepperdine's Most Fundable Companies. And that was actually our first time getting to meet in person, and you actually crushed that. I understand that there are some other successes that you might want to share about that have kind of happened, and one that is upcoming. And I do want to invite some folks to that future one. Can you talk a little bit about what's going on with Pegasus Tech Ventures and Startup World Cup?
Be happy to. Yeah, we've been accumulating hardware, winning a number of, in fact, I think most of the competitions we enter, we win. Seattle Angel Conference and several of the Keiretsu chapter most valuable company awards. But very recently, last month, we were one of 400 companies that applied to present at the Startup World Cup Silicon Valley chapter. There's like 20 something chapters globally. The Silicon Valley chapter is generally one of the most difficult to even be asked to present. So out of the 400 companies that applied, 16 companies pitched. We were one of those. And so I was pitching to a panel of venture capitalists and other, very respected judges. 1,200 people in the audience, and we got first place. So first place in the Startup World Cup, again, Silicon Valley chapter. And so the World Championships are coming up later in San Francisco. I believe you're going to be there, Eric. And so fingers crossed, send please positive energy and vibes to EarthGrid and to me and the team. But if we win the next competition, which will be the winners of each of the global chapters, the winner gets $1 million. So fingers crossed.
Yes, exactly. So that's right. I will definitely be linking up with Troy out in San Francisco for the finals. I had the good pleasure of judging and serving as a panelist in the Southern California chapter. So I had no influence over the Silicon Valley. They just had their own good independent judgment up there and giving Troy the first place award there. So I'd love to formally invite folks. October 4th in San Francisco is the Startup World Cup finals. You can hear more from Troy and put our positive vibes out there. For him to walk away with $1 million, one of the largest prize pools for a startup conference. It might be the largest for a startup competition, at least that I know of.
Yep. So
congratulations on accumulating all that hardware, doing the hard work to justify accumulating that hardware. That's nothing new to you. Hard work and achievements is nothing new to you, Troy. You talked a lot about the rest of the team here. I'm actually going to double us back for a moment. Have you had a little bit of success in your past, a couple of exits, a little bit of hard work in the past, some dollars raised? Why don't you tell us a little bit more about Troy?
Sure. Well, I mean, I've made plenty of mistakes in my career, learned a lot of the hard lessons, but yeah, EarthGrid is company number 8 for me. I've had 1 failure and 6 companies that I exited from. 2 of the exits were hardly anything, barely into 6 figures, but 2 of the exits were companies that became unicorns. One of them, I'll give you an example, is Tradewind Energy. I started that in the 1990s. It became the largest wind farm developer in the United States in 2017 and number 2 in 2018. It's now a $35 billion division of Enel Green Power. And another company that became a unicorn is Pristine Sun. It raised $250 million of equity capital a few years ago, and it's a solar farm developer. So I started that one. And then anyway, so 4 meaningful exits. Also, I'm an elite athlete. I've competed on American Ninja Warrior, and I still do that. Not on the show, but I competed last month, actually 2 months ago now, in the World Championships for the largest Ninja Warrior competition league in the world. So anyway, yeah, I try to stay fit to give me the energy to keep working as hard as I do.
No days off for Troy Helming. Thank you so much for sharing. And that was really just scratching the surface. Again, I'm going to direct you back to the offering page. We could spend a full hour just on Troy's background. Do check that out and learn more. I do love the kind of intertwining between your business and professional pursuits and your kind of personal endeavors as well. So I appreciate you sharing a little bit more about that. There are some great questions coming in. So while I'm going to pepper in some of the traditional things that we all have to know, revenue model, competitive analysis, we will dig into that as we go. But I want to start clearing out some of the backlog of questions here. So let's just get right to it. Are you finding pros and cons with plasma torch data from your various suppliers? I understand Pyrogenesis Canada has one of the largest groups of plasma experts in the world. Is there intent to move forward with Pyrogenesis and leverage their expertise? Really cool, nuanced question there. Thanks for that.
Yeah, for sure. We really like the Pyrogenesis technology and team. We do have an agreement signed with Pyrogenesis, and we're talking to them about doing some engineering and procurement of some of their equipment for our next batch of torches. We've purchased a total of 8 plasma torches and all of the related subsystems from other suppliers thus far. But yes, Pyrogenesis is definitely on our list for our next batch of procurement.
Awesome. Thank you. So somebody saw that coming there. More good questions. Can your technology be scaled up and applied to underground transportation infrastructure? That's a fun one.
Yeah, definitely. In fact, there's going to be hopefully some announcements over the next couple of months, some of which might be pretty exciting, about some of the tunnel projects that we've been working on for quite some time. In fact, several of them for more than 2 years. But most of the larger tunnel projects that are 2.5 meters, they're really utility tunnels, but we plan to include a transportation component in there, at a minimum having 0.5 meter to 1 meter tubes inside the tunnel to move freight and packages around. things like that. And so that'll be kind of the first step of transportation. But we do have a design for like subway sized tunnels as well. It just requires more plasma torches and, you know, more power to run it, of course. But the power is not that bad. You know, the machine that would bore, say, an 8-meter diameter tunnel, which is 26 feet for those who prefer feet. I prefer metrics. Anyway, 8-meter diameter would be enough for a subway, and that requires about the same amount of power as like a Tesla supercharging station. In fact, you know, a small Tesla supercharging station.
So it sounds like there's real opportunities to expand to that use case. I do want to get into what does the future have in store, and we can talk about other use cases for your technology then. So I won't dig into that quite yet. For those who don't fully appreciate the revenue model here, how does EarthGrid look to make money when you're applying, you know, kind of like this kind of public utility good here? What's the revenue model look like for EarthGrid, and maybe what it is now and what you intended it might be in the near future? Oh, and sorry, Troy, sorry. Before I let you dig into that, some people are asking me specifically for links to the Startup World Cup. I'm adding in the link to the finals there. So I wanted to cut you off for one quick moment. The link to the Startup World Cup finals that is there. Again, that is October 4th in San Francisco. So you can click the link there. You can learn more. You can register as well. Sorry, I had to sneak that one in there. But back to my question about the revenue model for EarthGrid, please.
Yeah, sure. I'll be brief. So we're not going to be selling our machines. We're not going to be, you know, like a John Deere or a Caterpillar or whatever. So we have two products, Boom and Badass. So I'll start with Badass because that's more fun. We like to have a sense of humor. Badass stands for boring and drilling as a simple service. And what that means is basically if a customer wants a tunnel or a ditch in rock or a cave or a ground vault, like a hole in the ground for splicing, you know, power lines or water pipelines or something together, and it's in rock, you know, in dirt, anybody can do that with, you know, a standard excavator. But when it's in rock, that's very difficult for most machines, and that's where we excel. So that's Badass. So if somebody wants a tunnel or a ditch or a hole in the ground, we'll dig it, we'll charge them for it, and we'll make a nice margin, generally 30 to 60% margin. So that's Badass if the customer wants to own their tunnel or their ditch. For Boom, in some cases, I'll give you an example. We have found a data center that needs power in Reno, Nevada. And we knew of a solar farm that has been trying to get built in Northern California, about 60 miles, about 100 kilometers away. And the solar farm can't get built because, again, the same problem. There's not enough transmission capacity. So we said, hey, data center, do you want to buy power from this solar farm? If so, we can dig you an underground tunnel, be your underground extension cord between the two. And that would be a Boom project, build, own, operate, and maintain. And so both of them said yes. And so we have a signed contract with the solar farm to buy power at a lower price that's good enough for the solar farm to make money. And then we're negotiating a long-term 25-year contract to sell the power to the data center at a higher price. And the delta, the difference between buy low, sell high, is enough to finance the cost of building that tunnel. We will own that tunnel, and it would generate $1.8 million a month of revenue for EarthGrid for 25 years, assuming that the customer signs, you know, the data center signs the contract, and we build the project. By the way, we've also checked with the two counties in between, and we've confirmed that our utility status gives access to, you know, to the rights of way to put that in. So that's an example of a Boom project. There's no revenue at all until the project is complete, right? We have to build the tunnel, put in the transmission line, and only then do we start generating revenue. However, because it's a long-term contract with an investment-grade, credit-worthy customer, we can go get a construction loan, which is non-dilutive, doesn't dilute all of our shareholders. It's a loan, right? To build the project, and then once it's complete, we start generating revenue.
Thank you so much for digging into the details there. There's more specifics on both Badass and Boom on the offering page. Check that out. But I love a little bit of fun. You know, it's a lot of hard work already, so a little bit of fun I think goes a long way. You'd mentioned a couple of key phrases there, and I'm not sure, maybe it's worth taking a quick moment. You mentioned right of way, and earlier you mentioned the kind of certificate of public convenience and necessity and your ability to operate in certain states. I'm obviously always fascinated about the regulatory environment. Can you talk a little bit more about the regulatory environment and how you comply with those regulations?
Yeah, sure. So we've been awarded a CPCN, a Certificate of Public Convenience and Necessity in the 46 states that I mentioned. So every state except Missouri and Arkansas and Hawaii and Alaska, and we'll probably apply in Missouri and Arkansas here later this year and get those wrapped up. But anyway, so we get that certificate, and what it means is that we are regulated by the State Public Utilities Commission as a telecommunications utility. So just like AT&T or Crown Castle, Verizon, American Tower, any other telco, they get access to put their conduits, you know, whether it's fiber or old school coaxial cable or copper or whatever, they get access to the public rights of way. We do too. So it gives us a preferred access. We still have to follow a procedure and file what's called a longitudinal permit with the state or the county or the city, whoever owns that road. But it makes it a non-discretionary process with generally no public comment period. So it's a much easier process being a regulated utility.
Thanks so much for digging into that. I wanted to put that on the recording here so folks can go back to it and really understand the work that you put in from a regulatory standpoint and what types of boxes that you've already checked off. I think about that largely in the defensibility and intellectual property standpoint. You've already gone through these hurdles. If somebody wanted to compete with you, they too would have to go through some of these hurdles. So I'm gonna use this as a transition to kind of the competitive analysis. You don't have to name anybody but name, but are there other players in the space? And what are some of the things that you've done to kind of build the moat or kind of increase your defensibility around this sector? And then we can dig into IP as part of this, or we can take a whole different conversation around intellectual property, but competitive analysis more broadly, if you will.
You bet. So there are a bunch of companies that are trying to come up with cheaper, faster ways to dig tunnels, right? Because it's so important for the reasons we've already discussed. One company in particular is called Petra. They used to be called ArcBit, and I was an early employee there. In fact, co-founder of that company. And then there was a dispute, and a lot of this is public information, but I can talk about it now because Petra is no longer in business. We bought the last 2 patents, which we were sharing with them. We bought some of their used equipment, and we hired what we believe was their top mechanical engineer. So, you know, it had a great idea. Frankly, my idea, but they were kind of competing with us, and they're not around anymore. There's other companies like Foro Energy using lasers. There's Quays using microwave kind of millimeter waves, and others. And we follow all of those, but we don't think anybody's going to be able to compete with us on speed or on cost. In terms of our defensive moat, we have a total of, I think we're up to, is it 9 or 10 patents with a total of 202 patent claims. In fact, we just filed another patent recently, last month. And so we're now up to 202 claims. Roughly, I think it's about 130 of those are approved or published, and the balance are pending. And it's not just in the US. We have a lot of patents granted in numerous countries. In fact, we're part of the ICT, the International Cooperation Treaty, or PCT, Patent Cooperation Treaty, but we've also specifically filed in the EU and Korea, Japan, Iceland, Canada, Australia, just, you know, numerous countries around the world. So we have good patent protection. And then in addition to that, we have over 1,000 trade secrets that we will never patent. You know, Coca-Cola, their secret formula was never patented because you only get protection for, like, you know, 21 years, right? So our trade secrets include things like our recipes for each type of rock. We have variables we can modify to optimize our rate of progress. And so those are our trade secrets. So we have patents, we have trade secrets, and the last leg of the competitive stool, or the defensive moat stool, is we have supplier agreements with key suppliers. Pyrogenesis was mentioned. There's others where we have exclusivity for our field of use, meaning other companies can't buy that equipment and compete with EarthGrid.
I love a comprehensive intellectual property strategy as much as the next person. So thank you for so much for taking us to the process there. Deep dive on the patents, and congratulations on getting those patents granted, many pending. And I love obviously the trade secret approach to some of those specific formulas that you can protect forever. That's a very exciting piece of the puzzle there. Somebody asked, and I think you basically answered it by describing some of the competitive analysis here. Do you have a first starter advantage over potential competitors?
Absolutely. Yeah, it'd be darn near impossible for anybody to use plasma to dig a tunnel anywhere in the world without infringing on our patents. And by the way, one last thing I'll mention, those of you who know the company Aon, A-O-N, huge insurance company, they actually gave us an indicative offer for a loan last year based on our IP. They looked at our trade secrets and our patent portfolio, and they said, that's really valuable. And we said, well, if we wanted a loan, we didn't take the loan because we don't want any debt. The company has no debt, and I really like that. But anyway, because lenders could, potentially cause problems if there was ever a downturn or whatever. So that's a little bit dangerous. Anyway, they valued our IP at between $200 and $600 million. Aon did. They gave us a loan of 100 to 150 million dollars, and they said that they usually give loans based on 25 to 50% of the value of the IP. So that implies a value of anywhere from 200 to 600 million. And our offering on Netcapital is at only 80 million.
Yeah, I love that. I love the Aon is very, very well known. They're established. They do their diligence very thoroughly. So I imagine they took a nice little deep dive into your patent claims. I love patent diligence. That's really exciting. So to hear that there was that much excitement, an opportunity, and an opportunity that you didn't have to capitalize on, I think that's also fantastic that you've been able to kind of leverage your kind of your background and the opportunity to be able to raise capital very thoughtfully and not dip into the debt, especially in the kind of current infrastructure, the kind of current market that we're seeing. So congratulations on that. But that is a really good kind of an indicator on what the potential value of that intellectual property is. We talked about your defensive moat and IP and how you fit into the competitive landscape, which I think is incredible. I do want to do a couple of quick talks about like kind of how your kind of how EarthGrid fits against the current the current opportunities. If you're not doing plasma, what would the industry standard be now? And of course, we're both in California right now, so I know we talk about avoiding wildfire risk, safer for workers, avoiding kind of working through severe weather. Can we take a moment to talk about how not just how you compete against other players who want to do something similar, but also how you kind of stack up against the industry standard right now, especially with that wildfire risk as we're seeing some worse and worse inclement climate.
Yeah, absolutely. So utilities are actually really starting to pay attention to this. Not only are most of the wildfires in Canada, California, even Texas, their worst wildfire in recent memory was caused by Xcel Energy overhead power lines, but also hurricanes, tornadoes, ice storms, squirrels, traffic accidents, all kinds of things will take the grid down, right? And so having overhead lines is a big problem because they're vulnerable. And what's shocking is if you look at Europe, 80% of their electric lines are underground. In the US, if I had to ask you all to guess, you probably wouldn't guess that we are 10 times worse. Only about 8% of our grid is underground here in the US. And so that's why our grid is so much less reliable than the European grid. So having said all that, utilities knowing this now, and you can find data, putting power lines underground means they're between 9 and 15 times more reliable than overhead lines. And that's not according to EarthGrid or me, that's public data from US utilities. You can go to Power Delivery Intelligence Initiative, which is a nonprofit group that has some good data on this if you'd like. But utilities are spending tens of billions of dollars every year now to bury power lines, and they're doing it with horizontal directional drilling, which uses chemicals, lubricants, drilling mud, bentonite, stuff like that, and you have to pay to get rid of the toxic wastewater. If it's going through any kind of rock, you have to change out the drill bit 5, 10, 15 times a day. It's very labor intensive, it's expensive, it's slow. Or they're using trenching, and in rock, they're using dynamite or basically jackhammers or rock hammers. Again, expensive and slow. So these are the conventional methods that have been historically used. And so we're bringing a new technology to an industry that's already trying to find faster, cheaper solutions for this problem. So the market potential for EarthGrid is pretty enormous. And we're to the point now where we have our first machine that's made some money. Last year, we made about $400-something thousand of revenue last year. This year, we hope to make a little over $1 million. Next year, over 10 million. With our 2-torch plasma excavation system, which can dig ditches or trenches in rock or soil, but it's really, anything can do soil. Our tunneling machine, we, for the first time, fired up 3 torches this summer, and we actually now have 6 torches. So we're going to be testing a 6-torch tunneling machine. So hopefully next year we'll be doing tunneling work, and we're already doing trenching work to speed up those conventional methods.
Continuing to improve on the improvement. I love that. We are a little bit past the halfway mark already, so I'm going to do one more reminder. I'm adding a link back into the chat here. I just added a link. You can go directly to the offering page. That's where you can learn more. You can dig into the nitty-gritty details about EarthGrid. You can check out the backgrounds of their team and their founders. You can see their successes to date. You can really get a really thorough analysis to decide if this is an investment opportunity that fits into your portfolio. So I added the link back into the chat here in Zoom. For those listening or not in front of their computers right now, you can go directly to netcapital.com and search for EarthGrid, or you can go directly to netcapital.com/companies/EarthGrid. That's my final little plug there, but I want to make sure it's as easy as possible for folks to get in there and learn more and potentially invest. You actually were just wrapping up on revenue forecasts. So somebody just asked about that. I don't think we have to dig back into that right now. I think that was super helpful. Somebody is asking about past fundraises, terms for those offerings. For regulatory purposes, I'm going to go ahead and have them go into the Netcapital offering page where you can actually learn a lot of details about past fundraises, terms for those fundraises, and the current offering terms. So I'm going to direct that question as well to the Netcapital offering page that I just added directly back into the chat there. Please do check that out. But on that kind of frame of mind, though, in terms of past raises, you have successfully raised on Netcapital in the past to the tune of a little over $3 million in a previous offering, and you didn't stop there. So without going too deep into the specific terms, can you talk a little bit about your fundraising history for EarthGrid and the success that you've been able to have there?
Yeah, for sure. So for those who don't know, I actually bootstrapped the company myself with my own capital for the first 5 years. So from 2016 until 2021, me and my wife, our family office, we put $13 million into EarthGrid. So we're pretty committed to the company. I mentioned earlier, Joan on our board, the Band of Angels, that was our pre-seed round. We wanted to raise 2 million. We ended up raising about 5.5 million. Then actually we got commitments for 7, but turned a few VCs down who wanted too much control. So we said no to them. And then we had a $15 million seed round, and the Netcapital offering was part of the seed round. They were both at the $60 million valuation pre-money. And we were like, okay, let's raise some money on Netcapital and let's raise up to 15 million from direct investment, people who are willing to write, larger checks of $25,000 or more directly to the company. And we ended up raising a total of 30 million in that seed round, including the 3.3 million from Netcapital. So all of our rounds thus far have been oversubscribed. We're currently back on Netcapital, and we also have a direct offering again for folks who want to write checks of typically 100,000 or more. Sometimes we'll take less at this value at this particular round. And again, go to the Netcapital page to see the terms, but the valuation is higher this time around because of all the traction we've achieved. But we've raised a total of roughly 50, actually now we're up to closer to $52 million of equity raised since inception, including my capital contribution.
Love that. And not only do I love that you've been able to get other people's money, OPM, and you've convinced some very thoughtful investors, very strategic investors. You've allowed our community in, which we're so grateful for. Congratulations to all the folks that got into EarthGrid's previous offering at the lower valuation. But you also show that you kind of put your money where your mouth is as well. Love seeing your own capital in the deal, especially in the early riskiest stage. So that's a kind of a real kind of vote of confidence. And it's not like you haven't seen success in the past in terms of exits and know what you're looking for. So love the story. Thanks. It was super linear. I was like, I felt like it was a movie. I hope you haven't sold your movie rights yet. I think it's a good story. So thanks for giving us the kind of the trailer view there.
Sure.
I do want to start transitioning a little bit more. Oops, somebody's trying to sneak in with a question here. Let's get this question in before I talk a little bit about other deal highlights. So okay. This is kind of like right in there. Why does plasma help digging a trench or tunnel in kind of simply soil? What happens to soil under high heat? So I think that's a really nice chance to take a step back and let's talk about why plasma is a great application here, and is that even a use case for simple soil? So I'll let you dig into that piece.
Yeah, it's a good question. I mean, other machines can go through soil, so plasma doesn't necessarily have as much of an advantage, but we have tested in it. So I'll tell you what happens. We used our one torch tunneling machine in basically a 6 meter, roughly 20-foot test bed years ago, multiple times. And in some cases it was, big boulders in there. In other cases it was boulders mixed in with soil. All the organics in soil just vaporize. They just disappear. And if there's any sand or anything left, it'll make kind of a crusty shell or anneal or glassify any of the sand in the cell around the edges of the tunnel. So we can go through soil, and it's really fast. So if there's a project that is heterogeneous geology, meaning it's not homogeneous, there's all different stuff, and there's rock in there mixed in with soil or clay or sand or loam or whatever, then we can go through all of it. We've tested, very hard rock to soil, everything that I just mentioned. And so we can do that. And what happens to, I already said what happens to the soil, what happens to the rock is one of three things. Most of the rock will spallate. That was a new term to me because I'm not a geologist, but spallation means the rock will turn into sand or gravel or little bits of rock. So spallation is what happens to most of the rock. Some of it will melt if there's silica in there. So we literally create man-made magma, and then we use a water-cooled vacuum. We don't spray water, but water-cooled sleeve in the vacuum to suck out that magma, the lava, and it turns it into silica sand. And then a small portion of the rock will vaporize. And then that vaporized rock will then cool and precipitate or rain into fine silt. So we use an off-the-shelf mining vacuum to extract all of that material. So if there's soil, some of the soil comes out in the vacuum, some of it vaporizes. But the temperatures range anywhere from a few thousand degrees to 27,000 degrees. And so the sand will turn to magma near the plasma plume, but it will turn to glass. I just saw the other question come in around the edges. So it's kind of nice. You have a glassy lining of the tunnel if there's silica in the rock, and then we spray with shotcrete and concrete on top of that.
Oh, that was great. None of us, I don't think many of us are geologists here, but somebody fact check that stuff. No, I think that sounded exactly right. That was very interesting. And that answers the next question too. So that's a little bit of the glass component there. So I appreciate that. You mentioned that was the one torch when you're going through something simple, simple soil. And my understanding is you have this updated system with 2 torches that plans to be ready in Q2, and you've already begun testing on this monster 9-torch tunnel boring robot that began testing earlier this year. Wow, that sounds like orders of magnitude more powerful. What are some of the use cases for a 9-torch tunnel boring robot? That sounds awesome.
It is, although it's only 6. I wish it were 9. We have 6. That's all we could get in time for this particular system. But you're right; it's still massive and very exciting. We've been testing in increments of 3, and so here's actually a pretty exciting thing that we've learned just in the last few months. When I filed the very first patent in 2016, I always thought there would be a synergy bonus, is what I called it in that first patent, I believe. But basically 2 torches side by side, they should help each other. Maybe you separate them a little bit because they're going to destroy the rock in the middle, right? So we always thought that 2 torches, 1 + 1 doesn't equal 2. It equals like 2.2, maybe 2.5 because of that synergy bonus. And sure enough, we tested our 2-torch excavator, and we learned the answer to that question, and I'll get to the 3-torch in a moment. But the 2-torch system, we learned that 1 + 1 isn't 2.5, it's 3.5 to higher, up to 4.3. So 2 torches do the work of 3.5 or more. So that was very exciting. The synergy bonus was even better than what our modeling and simulations had shown. And with 3 torches, it gets better as well. The synergy bonus will come down. There'll be some diminishing returns in terms of the increase with each added torch, but it will still increase. So we need to do a lot more testing, but we think 3 torches will be equivalent to close to 8.
That's incredible. It makes me think of, obviously when you horsepower, and having 2 horses running side by side is more powerful than you would imagine. 1 + 1, like as you mentioned, does not equal 2. It equals more than 2. But I was not ready for 3.5 plus. That is incredible synergy that they have together. I love that. I think I'm gonna pepper in. This might be one of the last questions. Feel free to keep asking those questions if you have them. And again, Jackie has shared information in there for follow-up questions, and there is a discussion board built into the Netcapital offering page, so you can go there and learn more as well. But I'm gonna pepper in this question, and I want to get a last couple before we let Troy get out of here. So, are there videos available for the test trenches going through miscellaneous materials, and separately for the test tunnels?
Yes, there are, and I know Faunus is on here as well. We have some of those videos on our YouTube channel, and I believe some have been posted on the Netcapital page, and we will be continuing to curate and edit, kind of highlights or good clips and so forth. I have to say, it's hard at these temperatures. Faunus had to get a pretty expensive lens and camera to be able to capture the information and the right filters, because we're basically creating a miniature sun, very small version of the sun, but that's effectively what the sun is, a big ball of plasma, right? And we're using plasma. So, and plasma is not new. It's been around since the 1970s, but we're just using it in this application and got it patented because no one else really thought of it or thought to patent it. But yes, definitely be making videos available. I also wanted to be sure to mention, I know Jackie put our email address, the company email address, in the chat. Feel free to email us so we can get you added to our newsletter, because we do send out a monthly investor newsletter, in addition to making the posts on Netcapital.
Thanks for that. Absolutely. I'm subscribed. You definitely should subscribe and learn more, keep track of what these folks are up to. Okay, that gives me a chance to get into our last couple questions here. Let's talk about the future. Let's talk about tons and tons of successes in the past. We talked about modification of the existing product. I imagine there's going to be more and more torches doing more and more super cool things that we're going to be struggling to capture. But what are some of the handful of things that you're excited for in the near future, and maybe even way out there? Is there anything you're excited and hopeful for in the way out there future?
Yeah, we're talking to some very big companies about some deals that we're working on, customer contracts, about 3 or 4 different joint venture possibilities, things like that, including a large JV deal that we announced, I think, last year or listed on the Netcapital page that was signed, and we'll have hopefully some more news on that coming up soon. So I'm excited about some of the opportunities for us to start long projects. We have a bunch of shorter projects, trenches and shorter tunnels, like under creeks and rivers and things like that we'll be doing. We've identified 2 sites, one in Texas, one in Montana, where we're going to be doing some trenching in rock. And so we're finalizing the agreements with both of those site owners to get started on those projects. So that'll give us a great opportunity out in the field to get really good video, to the earlier question of the trenching. As I mentioned earlier, I think we're still looking at sometime next year for tunneling out in the field, but we're going to be doing tunneling at our testing facilities and going ideally fairly deep, like a number of meters, hopefully 3 to 6 meters or more into rock, and doing tunnels and be able to show videos of those. Another thing that I'm super excited about, though, is the fact that we have some big transmission line projects where we're going to solve the specific problem of getting solar and wind to the market. It's called a gen-tie, but basically it might be like a 10 or 20 kilometer, like a 6 or 12 mile connection from a solar farm that's not yet built, that needs to get to a substation with capacity, because the substation that's closest to them maybe doesn't have capacity. So some of those projects I'm excited to announce. And the last thing I want to mention is, as our revenue starts to increase, we've been talking to some of the biggest investment banks, Bank of America, Morgan Stanley, Goldman, blah, 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 about taking EarthGrid public. We don't know when that will be, but we think based on our projections, we think a pretty reasonable estimate would be 2027, maybe 26, maybe 29 or 30, but 28 or 29 or 30. But we think 2027 is a pretty reasonable time frame for the company to go public.
Love that the IBs, the investment banks, already showing interest in helping you get to that next level. That is one of the greatest goals of all entrepreneurs, is that exit there. Somebody did ask about plans to go public. Can you talk a little about other exit strategies? Maybe are there other conversations with kind of acquisition targets or anything like that? Can we talk a brief moment on other exit strategies? Although it does sound like IPO with IBs already interested could be a great opportunity for you.
Yeah, there are some companies that have kind of been making noises that they might want to, talk to us about acquisition. We've talked to several of them and are working with several of them. We just got a term sheet from a strategic investor that's wanting to invest directly in EarthGrid. A much larger check amount, and they're a potential acquisition, suitor, I guess you could call them. For the future, but this would be kind of the way to get to know us a little bit, and others are talking to us. And then there's kind of a middle ground, which is where we can start paying dividends to our shareholders as we're generating revenue. And then there's also secondary market offerings and additional crowdfunding offerings, like maybe a Reg A plus, where it could be at a higher valuation. It's almost like going public without really going public, but it gives people liquidity. So we're going to explore those options, because my staff, and we have a lot of angel investors and a lot of Netcapital investors, and I love the idea of democratizing the ownership of utilities and infrastructure. And but some of my staff and some of our investors want to take some chips off the table at some point. So we want to make that option available as soon as we're able to.
Love that, Troy. Thank you so much for that. And obviously, we announced our partnership with Templum on our alternative trading system, and our expansion to the broker dealer space to potentially support you with that Reg A if you do decide to go in that direction. So you got a lot of support and love here on the Netcapital team, ready to help you get to the next level, whatever that looks like. Last couple pieces here. I love this question. This is one I started peppering in more recently. Outside of cash, and obviously cash is a good one. Feel free to invest. I shared the link a couple times. But outside of cash, how can folks on the line or listening to this recording, how can they support you and the rest of the team at EarthGrid?
Love that question. My favorite one of the day. So the easiest answer for that is help us find projects or customers. We're looking for trenching opportunities in rock. It could be somebody that's, a home builder building a house that wants a foundation, and they're going to have to jackhammer out because, the dirt only goes so deep, and then there's rock. We want opportunities to deploy our two-torch plasma excavation system in all different types of geologies and in different locations. Because if we deploy it to, say, the Midwest or the East Coast or Canada or wherever, Europe, doesn't matter. If we deploy, as long as it, the cost has to be cost effective, of course, there has to be enough revenue to justify it. But we want to deploy it and give folks an opportunity to come see it in action. So like we do demonstrations live of our machine operating. We did some work on a hillside, dug a test tunnel on a hillside here in Northern California, and we would invite people over to see it in action. Seeing is believing. So we want to have opportunities to do that all over the world. So please find us opportunities to get our two-torch excavator operating somewhere. And quite frankly, we would be willing to do it at cost for the next probably 6 months, just to get more experience on different types of geologies.
What I'm hearing is somebody asked for a video and you saw the opportunity, you raised them. You said, forget a video, we'll come in person and do the demo. If you find opportunities, you get to see this real time. I imagine there's probably some really cool eyewear to protect you for that. So that sounds like a really cool opportunity. So folks, look into your opportunities, into your ecosystem. If you see there's a potential to coordinate more closely with EarthGrid, again, Jackie did add their information directly into the chat there. So reach out to EarthGrid at earthgrid.io. And of course, there's a discussion board on Netcapital if that's a way for you to get in touch with them. Love that. I'm glad you like that question. Thank you. I started peppering in. I should have done it earlier. My final question, and this is really more of an opportunity for you, is my closing remarks. Now, this is a little bit more familiar. I'm going to give you a chance to say why now is the perfect time to go to netcapital.com and invest in EarthGrid. We laid out a lot of really exciting things that you've accomplished already. You talked about your team. You talked about potential X opportunities. But why is now the perfect time to go ahead and go directly to Netcapital and invest in EarthGrid? And while you're doing that, I'm going to add a link back into the chat. This is the final shameless plug about the investment opportunity. So the link is going to be in the chat. So real time, that is there. But now why Troy is now the perfect time to go and invest in EarthGrid on Netcapital.
Yeah, thanks. So with some of the customer deals that we're negotiating, we're going to sign, one or more of these fairly soon. I would think over the next few weeks or month, maybe 2 months. We're at this inflection point at EarthGrid where we have this amazing technology. It's literally world-changing technology, right? But we're still early. We've been doing 7 years of R&D, testing, and so forth. A little bit of revenue, but we're about to explode. with revenue and customers. And that means our valuation is also going to explode. And so if you want an opportunity to get in on a company at a valuation that we think is artificially low, you heard Aon, you know, valued our IP at, you know, way higher than our current 80 million valuation pre-money. And you can have an opportunity to get in before this round closes. We'll have to close it out. Like, for example, if we have to announce publicly one of these huge contracts, we're probably going to have to close the campaign a few weeks after that, or maybe even a few days after that, because our valuation could skyrocket up, you know, by 10x or more. So that's really why now, because at some point it may not be, the valuation may be too high to get the upside that some folks are looking for. A lot of angel investors and crowd investors want to see that 10x return or 5x. In this case, the investment banks we're talking to are talking to us about a valuation in the $5 to $8 billion range within 3 years. I don't know if that's true. That's not a promise. Can't obviously guarantee anything, but based on the customer contracts in our $4 billion HubSpot sales funnel pipeline, if even a portion of those close, 10% of those close, then I think that valuation could be realistic. And now you're talking about a 100x upside on the investment. So, you know, I don't want to sound hypey, but I know that we have a tiger by the tail here. I know the value that we're about to create, and this might be your last chance.
Thank you so much for that, Troy. And I'm going to sneak in an anecdote here that somebody just got in here. As someone who ducked and covered in my classroom to prevent being vaporized by a nuclear bomb, your company sounds like the perfect solution to build very deep and expansive fallout shelters. So one more use case opportunity there. Thank you so much for sharing that in the chat. I'm not going to give you a moment to address that because we did do closing remarks. Sorry, you ran out of words, but I think I want to thank you, Troy, and Jackie, and the entire EarthGrid team for coming on. I appreciate you for always working with us, allowing, like you said, the democratization of capital. This is an incredible opportunity. I'm so grateful that we've had past Netcapital users get in this deal, and there's an opportunity to get in here now again. So thank you so much for your team there. Thank you so much for the attendees, dozens of you on the line here asking very thoughtful questions. So thank you so much for everybody attending and listening in. If you know somebody who missed this or missed some of this, you think would be interested in learning more about EarthGrid, I'm adding a link to our YouTube channel into the chat there, or you can go to YouTube and just search Netcapital. But we'll have this uploaded shortly where you can go back, review anything that you might have missed, and definitely share it with a friend that you think might find this interesting. So you can see that link there, or you can search for the Netcapital channel on YouTube. With that being said, I just want to thank everybody for joining. It's an incredible opportunity. I hope we could keep offering live long enough to get through the World Finals. Again, we'll see as many of you that want to come up to San Francisco for the Startup World Cup World Finals in San Francisco. So definitely check that out. Maybe we can all hang out. But hopefully we can keep you live long enough to get through that programming. It should be a good time. Thank you so much for everybody. I appreciate you all, and please enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you, Troy.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks, everyone.
Bye now.